This episode has a slightly different focus as I meet with local authority educational psychologist Dr Melissa Morrison, and we discuss a range of topics related to our shared interests in strength training and educational psychology. Two things you might not usually find together, but that have both been influential in our lives, each helping us understand the other. Section 3 of the HCPC Standards of Proficiency emphasises how important it is for practitioner psychologists to be aware of how best to support our own mental and physical health and well-being so that we can manage the physical, psychological and emotional demands of the job. And strength training is just our example of an activity that has supported us with that. So even if lifting weights is not your thing, we hope you might still find the stories interesting and that it might stimulate your own thoughts around what does or doesn't support your well-being and sense of empowerment. Our wide-ranging chat includes Melissa's journey to both strength training and educational psychology, about the similarities and differences we notice between the two areas of psychology, and whether we could or should do more as EPs to support children and young people's body awareness, access to sport or physical activity. As usual, thank you so much for listening, and please enjoy this episode with Dr Melissa Morrison, educational psychologist. It's really great to have you here with us, Melissa. Thank you for taking the time.
Oh, thank you.
Not at all. So for some context for people who maybe don't know Melissa and I have never met in person, but we did have a very nice brief online meeting.
Yep, we did.
Where we got to know each other a little. And that was after I reached out to you. I think you'd followed something or you'd liked one of my first podcasts, which I was very pleased about, and followed your page. And I noticed that we have two shared interests. So the first one being educational psychology, but the second one being that you are also into strength training. And so that was immediately very interesting to me. And you've also been recognised more broadly and nominated for an Academic Excellence Award through the Potential Unlocks Awards. So congratulations on that, first of all.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah. And maybe you can tell us a little bit about that later as well.
Yeah, for sure.
It'd be great to hear about that. So it seems like for us, we've got a shared interest and we've got a kind of shared experience that strength training has been quite an important part of our lives. What I should say is that while I'm saying these are shared interests, so I have been doing CrossFit for about 12 years, and that incorporates some strength training, which means I have an awareness of just how staggeringly physically strong you are.
Oh, man.
So I had to check again on your page. If you've got any familiarity with strength training at all, you will know that a 240 kilo trap bar deadlift is massive. That is incredible. And I know that doesn't come with a lot of training, a lot of focus, a lot of work and effort. But your unbelievable physical strength is not actually the reason I was keen to talk to you, although I might have reached out for some tips. It was more you're someone who has found something else in life to help sustain you and focus you, and that will look different for different EPs, but we had a bit of a shared interest in that. So I'd love to speak to you about your experiences,
Absolutely.
how that journey has been for you and what's been important to you in all of that. So I'm really excited to talk to you. So thank you again for being here.
Oh, thank you. Anytime.
Fab. So I guess just the first bit that I am interested in is your journey. So, and there's the two bits, I suppose, your journey into educational psychology and your journey into strength training. And I know those two things in themselves, I'm sure, will be loaded with lots of stories and everything. So it would be great to hear a little about maybe key influences for you in relation to where you've come to today. I don't know where you want to start, but any kind of key points maybe.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start with coming into educational psychology without losing track on the way. But it started off, I went to a private school, spent my primary years there, and I absolutely loved it. But I really struggled to keep up with the demands of a private school, really struggling academically, especially with maths in particular. You know, I had other areas of strength that I was doing well in, but I found at this school that I loved, there's a lot of emphasis on maths, the English, the science, because the goal is to get you into a grammar school or a senior private school, or just to set you up in their perspective for better success. but it was really hard. I feel like the school tried every intervention that they could. Didn't really work. I wasn't really making much progress. And so my parents made the decision to move me into a comprehensive school, hoping that maybe I'd stand a better chance since I'd started off in a private school and the same problems were existing in a comprehensive school. And I guess for me, it was quite embarrassing. And I remember one day specifically just feeling like I was beyond help because I'm in different types of schools and I'm still not making any progress. Nobody really understands how to teach me. And I had almost like a moment where I just thought, man, if I could teach the teachers how to teach me, then maybe I would be better. And I was quite an inquisitive young girl. I like to research things. And as I was playing around, like psychology came up. And for me, I thought about it as maybe it's just teaching the teachers how to teach the kids. And where I was sold, because I didn't want another young person to go so long in education feeling like they were beyond help. And I just took that and ran with it. And going throughout school, I continued to struggle with math, failed maths GCSEs so many times, I've paid for so many resits. Um, it really kind of broke my heart because psychology at university needed to have maths. So I was like, and cutting some corners of the story, but it ended up with me going to adult night school in order to pass GCSE maths, which again was another level of embarrassment, but almost more fuel for I cannot let a child persist with these problems because we still weren't finding the ways to teach me. On that path, it was good that I had the mindset of becoming an EP in some way, shape, or form. So the social sciences I took quite seriously. And it actually took me a while to get the gist of psychology, research method side. And I kind of leaned more towards the sociology side. So I did a joint honours at university in the end. But in those sociology lessons, I just seemed to catch it. Whatever the teacher said, some people might argue it's an easier subject. I don't know. I didn't care. But this was one
Yes.
subject that I was getting. And I really have to shout out Nikki Grant. She's was my teacher at the time, but my friend now. She just made it so accessible to me. And that was the first time. And I had other strengths like PE and music, but this was the first kind of academic-y one that I was getting. And it it just sparks something in me. Like the way she's teaching, the way she's breaking down the resources that she's using, I'm just catching it. And so all that experience, I went off to university and I struggled at uni as well. The struggle just never seemed to stop for me. And fortunately, I've come out the other end. So I went through my undergraduate, my master's. The struggle with understanding psychology required me to be resilient because it took me a good 4 tries to make it onto a course. But I think I've always just had that drive I almost feel like a little bit of extra responsibility. I just do not want a young person to feel how I felt coming up in school. So a little bit of a wounded soldier complex, but also matched with, okay, I don't want them to feel like that. So I need to make sure that I'm finding the things that they are good at. And that's kind of driving my strength-based stance that I take in educational psychology and fiercely trying to find what a young person is good at. We shouldn't have to wait until they're in year 11 to be like, oh, they're good at this, at this. I'm like, catch it quickly and push those more than the areas of development. I want a child to experience joy and success and be motivated to come to school. But they're not if they're constantly being pushed to excel in subjects that they really struggle with. And so, in I come into educational psychology and I bring that experience and I hope, recognizing strength in different areas. Mine was sport, but I brought that with me and here I am as a newly qualified.
Absolutely. And that award title, Potential Unlocked, I mean, that feels like a very apt, very fitting title for what you've just described. I'm interested in, because I know there will be some teachers listening to this.
Yeah.
And also educational psychologists will be keen to hear about this as well. What it was that either your teacher, Nikki Grant, she sounds amazing, or what happened in night school that made it possible. And also what you said, I wish I could teach the teachers to know how to teach me. Which approaches or which ways do you think were really helpful for you, or the ways that you wish you could have said to the teachers, look, please do it this way, and that'll really help,
For sure.
if you can remember.
Yeah, I think to start off with, there's a little bit of emphasis on intrinsic motivation. I think I came
Mm.
into social sciences with a level of intrinsic motivation from me because I wanted to be an EP. And I think that always someone's motivation counts for something. Why is someone going to want to do something if they're not motivated? But that was matched with my teacher's belief in me. And this was one of the few times where I had a teacher in school that wanted to work with me. So I think she picked up that I concentrate better at the front. I concentrate better when I have information presented to me in different ways. Some people respond better to visuals. I actually respond to a lot more text-based pieces of information. So things that were presented in writing, copying
Yeah.
off the whiteboard. I work better when I'm sitting by myself as opposed to with a peer. And I think Nikki took that and ran with it, but it was also the motivation, it was the praise and the reinforcement, it was allowing me to contribute to what was going to be taught in the lessons. It was putting role models in front of me as well, which sounds quite cheesy, but there were some psychologists that I really looked up to. And she would always make that link in terms of Martin Seligman would say this, Bandura would say this. Now you say this, like let's marry it all together. And it just gave me this light, this zeal. I wanted to come back to the lessons. I read outside of the lessons. I did homework faster because I just felt like I had a teacher that was working with me and
Yeah.
working with my pace and putting in a lot of effort. So I think in terms of teachers, and I know it's hard when you've got classes full of 30 children, it's about learning students and learning what they respond to and how they respond. And one adaptation might not work for one child, but it will work for another. And it's just taking that time and responding. But also expectations and attitudes towards these pupils. Young people are really bright. They catch attitudes towards them and how you present yourself, and they know whether you believe in them or not. And I think that in turn impacts on the way that they see themselves, how motivated they're going to be, how much effort they're going to put into things. So there's definitely a lot about learning your pupils.
Yeah. And it is such a challenge, isn't it, when there are, as you say, a big class of young people. But it's something that seems so important that we need to think around how can we make this possible?
Yeah.
We were having a conversation in class yesterday, actually, and we were talking about early years environments and optimal spaces and that kind of thing. And we started talking about physical spaces. And then someone said, I wonder if we were to think of the classroom as a relational space instead of a physical space.
Mm.
That instantly just shifts the tone of it and the purpose of it and many other elements of it. And it's not without challenges at all.
Yeah.
But maybe if we think about things in that way, it can help us see that the priority is for people to feel seen, heard, understood, invested in. But a massive challenge, I think, especially for larger classes and things. And I don't know, is there scope for that to be built into peer relationships as well in a different way that EPs can support with, or lots to think about? And the role models as well,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
be modeling.
Yeah. I think this is a key theme. Did you want me to go into how I got into strength?
Yeah, I'd love that.
I
Yeah,
forgot
please.
the
Thank you.
question.
That's okay. I know, I have a feeling we might go off in lots of different places. That's fine. You could lead us into that as well. That would be great.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've always been active in some way, shape, or form, but I actually worked in a school as a teaching assistant, and young people do enrichment on a Wednesday, where they're part of the timetables for some kind of extracurricular activity. And I
Yeah.
was asked to help support in one called Strength and Conditioning,
Mhm.
which involved taking a group of young people to this gym in Birmingham that I train at now, so MSc Performance, to train with the coaches doing Metcon, so the high cardio, tense training, and then towards the summer we introduced some of the weightlifting, so you squat and the deadlift. And it was a really great opportunity to bring young people of varying abilities. So we weren't just bringing top of the class perfect children. We were bringing those who we thought were disengaged, or those who had problems with peer relationships, those who had special educational needs. So we made sure that the group was varied and a fair opportunity. And I went along observing in the first few weeks and just seeing the enjoyment the young people were experiencing, the empowerment, the learning of the new skills, almost like the epiphanies that the young people were like, oh, I can actually do this, was amazing to me. And there I am standing on the sidelines getting a bit of FOMO, like, oh gosh, like they are having all the fun. So I brought down my gym kit and I started to jump into the fun with them as well. And my wonderful coach, Mark Colson, a huge shout out to him and how I've got so far today, saw me kind of jumping in and pushing some sleds and kettlebells and stuff. And he raised an eyebrow like, like,
You seem quite strong.
and a few weeks later, one day, I was trying to mess around with the deadlift and we really let the kids go. They were having a great time. And I'm in the back trying to do something. But one day, Coach Mark, pulled out the trap bar and he just put some weight on and he said, I'd like to have a look. Could you lift this? And I did. Put some more weight on. Could you lift this? And I did. Put some more weight on.
He's like, I'm running out of weights now.
And then we got up to 130. And
Oh my
he
goodness.
was just like, right, this is 130 kilos.
Yeah.
Brace yourself, 3, 2, 1, lift it. And there's me lifting it off the floor and it lifts and his face was just like, right.
Right, this is exceptional.
The sentence that sticks with me to the day is that he said, I can turn you into a powerlifter. And
I think you already were, to start with. By the sounds of things, I think you... That's a very competitive lift already, day one. Yeah.
I remember just feeling frightened because I knew nothing really about weight, but also it was, again, it's the importance of having key adult figures in your life. This was an adult who met me and was like, I see some potential that can be worked and make you into something. And that was the beginning. I mean, I did run away for a couple of weeks and did not return back to that gym because I was so afraid. I didn't know what was coming in, but I think those words kind of played in my mind like, okay, well, what could become of me in this? And I think going through education and struggling so much and then stumbling across something that was, I wouldn't say natural, but it wasn't such a fight for me to be decent at.
Yeah.
I was like, well, I'm not going to let that go because this might be all there is for me. I took up membership and I never looked back. And 7 years later, it is the best decision that has come out of my 20s into my 30s. I couldn't imagine my life without it.
I know, and there's so many bits in there. I think that I hadn't realised, it does really sound like you stumbled upon this. So I hadn't realised that it was through your work.
Yeah.
And being there with young people and played around a little bit and found out this is something that appeared to be aligned quite well with strengths for yourself as a person. And that is a very powerful thing, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It is. It's so empowering to know that I can do something like this. It brings a steady confidence, not a cockiness. It's just like this assurance, like I can do something. And that attitude, it permeates to how I behave at work because, growing up, having so many knocks in school and education plays such a huge role in our lives, both formal and informal. My confidence was borderline non-existent, but then to find something where I could do it well meant everything to me at the time. And I think now I stand taller, I'm prouder of myself, and through strength I'm able to achieve and become more resilient. And that has definitely supported me, especially on the journey to becoming an EP, where was, as I said, it took me 4 times to get on. Facing those rejections and bouncing back from it was a skill that I had learned from my strength training, because in my training we train and train and train, and then we have these tests that come once every 4 months or something, where we call it a max out, where it's your best at the time. And I haven't had the best results all the time, and it's about picking myself up. And we have our little hashtag on our gym t-shirts saying we go again. And it's just that bouncing back, that resilience, that you get up and you turn up and you go train, you carry on, it doesn't stop here. And that mentality definitely helps me trying to get onto the EP course. It's crazy to think.
Well, and I've had similar experiences of the teachings that CrossFit has taught me being
Yeah.
really helpful in my working life as well. So let's get on to that in a wee minute. But just before we do, I think for me, the bit about a connection to your body, and in the last couple of episodes we've had and with other conversations with people I've been having as well, this thread of kind of getting to know yourself has come through.
Yeah.
And I think before I started CrossFit, or before I got into it, I dabbled in various bits of exercise. I wanted to be very slim, and all these unhealthy messages that were around in the 90s and early 2000s. They're still here, unfortunately, but I hadn't thought about the benefits of strength.
Yeah.
And there was just a bit of I was a very active child. So I was like kind of ants in your pants kid, bouncing around. And my mum was always saying, well, you just sit still. All of that kind of thing. But then throughout late teens, early 20s, I just let all of that go.
Mm.
And I think when I came into CrossFit, it was kind of like a bit of me was coming back. Like I'd reconnected a bit with my identity, or coming into that and being physical again in that way was a good fit for me at that time. And it had something to do with getting to know myself again. And like I say, that'll be a different thing for different people. That might be going back to music. That might be doing a bit of this, that, or the next thing. But there was something quite important for me about that. This sounds really ridiculous, but like seeing your brain and your body as one thing, and you've got responsibility for it, and all of that side of things was something that I remember noticing, which has tied in, doesn't it, to like how you respect yourself.
I feel like that's so powerful as well. Sorry to jump in, but it's making me
No, at
think
all.
about like how society's conditioned femininity and womanhood. And, we might touch on it later, but that has been like such a barrier that has stopped women from maybe experiencing the joy that we have found through sport. And something resonated with me when you said about learning you away
Mm-hmm.
from what society has told us that we should be like.
Yeah.
But this has given us that avenue to explore and realize that we have bodies that support us and that we are fit for life. And
Yeah.
something about just that acceptance of the different types of bodies as well. Maybe we get through this strength training, we have muscles, and that is okay.
Oh,
It's so interesting, isn't it?
it is. That is something I have really noticed and thought about, is how I think it has helped me accept my body
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
how it is. Because I remember, I hadn't lifted any weights before I did CrossFit. And I went to a couple of kettlebell classes or something and was like, my goodness, these are very heavy, but not regularly at all. And I remember lifting a barbell for the first time. Someone had to help me. A friend of the gym had to help me get the barbell into like the press position. I couldn't lift it on. I think for me, what I noticed was I've never liked running, never felt natural about it. I still don't really, but I'll give it a go. We can make progress in many different things. But what I found was when I started lifting weights, I was like, I like this. My body likes this.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I was feeling like I knew that I was developing muscle, and I was coming up against those comments. I don't know if you've ever had them, like, well, don't get too big. And people are close to me as well. Like, well, I want to lose weight, but not like that. And I was like, this is very interesting, because at the same time as I'm starting to feel more empowered, like this is aligned with who I feel like I am, or what feels quite natural to me, coming up against these messages that are kind of saying the opposite. And if I hadn't been a bit older and being part of, I think, like a CrossFit community, where that was a good thing, I definitely would have slipped back. I definitely would have been like, oh yeah, okay, right enough. No, this isn't the right thing to be doing. As much as I like to think I wouldn't have, I hope now I would have, a bit older, but I'm pretty sure had I been a bit younger and not been around that community, I would have taken those maybe subliminally and thought, oh yeah, right enough, I better not. I better go back to something else.
And you know what? Like, that strikes a chord about the power of the community, as you said, is so
Yeah.
important, because
Mm-hmm.
during lockdown, I don't know if my ears were pricked, but I got a lot more comments about building muscle, don't put on too much. Remember, you need to look nice in the dress, da 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 da.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So much so that we came out of lockdown and I went to my gym and I cut myself out of the barbell club, which, as I said
Oh.
before, I call the best thing that happened to me. But it was enough to make me cancelled the membership, and I
Gosh.
went straight to the cardio, run up and down. Maybe this is the best way for me. But it was I only cut it out for 4 weeks, but it was during those 4 weeks, I felt like a part of me had gone. Like my
Yeah.
mood had
Yeah.
dropped. Like I was just a little bit, I felt so sad. I felt a bit lost. Like the one thing that I had found that was bringing me so much joy and empowerment was taken
Hmm.
away because I had allowed somebody who doesn't even lift weights or has a kind of a bit of a thwarted perspective of what this can do for women. I let those
Hmm.
change my thoughts and take away my joy. And I think it's part of maybe it's added to the fire now. Like I'm not giving this up again because I realized what it did in that 4 weeks, those faulty messages. So, and that decision happened when I was away from my community where we are championing being strong, we are championing positivity and body positivity. The
Hmm.
second that I had come out of that covering and I heard this message and I cut it, was a bit of a bit of downfall. So community is so powerful.
It really is, isn't it? And actually, just the other bit that it taught me is accept my body as I'm saying, but also, like what you said, I think, is just we need to normalize the range of bodies, the range of shapes, the range of abilities, the range of perspective, like the diverse way that humans exist in this world. We need to acknowledge that more, don't we? I mean, I'm kind of
Yeah.
like overextending it now, but it really does relate, I think, to that just awareness that we all come in different ways, shapes, sizes, experiences, abilities, and we need to be careful about the messages that we're putting out there or that we're
Yeah,
part of.
absolutely.
Yeah, which includes, we're talking about strength training here, includes whatever it is that EPs or practitioners find helpful, things that align with you or things that feel like they're a good fit. Okay, so different educational psychologists would have different views on this. I actually don't know what my view is around what the EP role could be if we're thinking about how to support young people with body awareness and having to think about the range of opportunities, experiences that might be available to them to just kind of play around with what's a good fit for me or what's not. I know you did a thesis on something around this, didn't you?
Yeah, yeah. So my thesis explored mid-adolescent girls and their perceptions of sports-based extracurricular activities, just to understand better what they're thinking about sport. And, I wasn't trying to prove anything, just exploring, but I think some of the implications are around visibility.
Okay.
Who are our role models in school, especially when it comes to PE role models, famous role models? Who are we talking about? We have loads of role models in all the different subjects. We all remember our scientists, our psychologists, but who are our sports based role models? One of the biggest things that came out was about accessibility, and we as EPs are able to explore that maybe through consultation, discussions with schools, maybe look at how they're spending the budgets and things like that for sport, because the findings that came out were boys are able to access the cool indoor football heated places, pitches, they're going on trips, whereas the girls have been left in the hall with the bench ball and broken balls for netball. It also comes down to socioeconomic. So in my study, I used a school that was in quite an affluent area, and so they were able to access private gym clubs, sports coaches hiring them in, whereas the school that was not in the affluent area, their options were very limited. So I think maybe there's scope through consultation to explore what are these young people able to access? Can we bring people in? I think it ties with my next point about collaboration with communities. And that goes back to the enrichment activity that I used to lead in the school. Can things like that happen where we are taking young people to a local independent gym where they are able to access maybe a new sport? And we've acknowledged that weights aren't for everybody, but there is an option to try. And if they don't like it, then that's okay. But I think it's about that exposure to different things and seeing what people latch onto. So definitely collaboration. And I think there's something about EP supporting again the narrative that we have around physical activity as a whole in school. Is there something in terms of how we are talking about PE, physical activity. And I have to acknowledge things are changing, and I think that's in light of what's happening in wider society. So, for example, the Women's World Cup and how millions of people tuned into that. And now we're seeing the narrative change in terms of women can be great in these domains. But now the conversation, government-wise, is making sure that at the grassroots there is now access so that young people, girls, young people in general can push themselves to things like this. And I think it's definitely around student voice and EPs, trainee EPs, continuing their research around maybe the barriers as to why young people maybe drop off, what opportunities they would like, what they would like access to, because we could implement all these things and for all we know, young people might not actually want them. But
Yes.
something about getting student voice and working from there. And also, lastly, I was reading something about the sports coach taking on a new role. So it's almost like a blended role. We've got a lot of young people in our schools that struggle with social, emotional, mental health needs, and they might not always relate to staff who are in school. And so, is there a space for them to access a sports coach who can serve in a more pastoral capacity? It's someone who is dressed like them, who speaks like them, who's on their level that they might actually connect with and might have
Yeah.
a better outcome. And I'm glad I'm seeing a lot of research about using sports coaches as part of interventions, bringing them in or taking young people to them.
Wow.
That's definitely something that can be explored. And it's something that I try and do in my work, is trying to make links with, you know, local football clubs or sports clubs, and something I'm quite passionate about continuing trying to.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting because it's making me think about like the EP role and assessment
Yeah.
and how clear we are about what knowledge do we have about this young person and how broad and holistic is that. And I hope that people listening to this, it doesn't sound as if we're like, oh, sports talent and that's what we're talking about. I'm not talking about that at all.
Yeah.
I think what I believe is that bodies function well when they have some sort of sensory kind of stimulation. I'm moving my head. Sensory stimulation, movement, when it has opportunities for that. And for one person, that might look like you've got a physio session. And for other people, that might look a lot more competitive in nature. But some recognition of the fact that we are sensory beings and movement and activity can be really helpful and needed in terms of helping function better and feel better. And then add in like the coach element or another human element, and that becomes quite a powerful thing. And young people in schools, peers, communities, role models, like having people around can make such a difference, can't it? Yeah.
Absolutely.
So something I've been wondering about too is how we apply psychology in I'm going to say sports, but I mean movement, activity, fitness kind of domain, and how that is the same or different to the kind of psychology we'd be thinking about in educational psychology. And I'm asking that because of my own experience, and also because I noticed in the HCPC guidance. So how do we look at that? For those who are not aware, HCPC is Healthcare Professions Council. They've got standards of proficiency that any educational psychologist or practitioner psychologist has to adhere to. And they have a list of standards. Some of them are for particular domains of psychology. So some are particular for educational psychology and sports psychology, and others are more general for all practitioner psychologists. So what I noticed about the educational psychology domain is that there are more of them. Most, as we would expect, focus on thinking of the systems and structures around children and young people, very holistic, which is great. And then when you get to sports psychology, there are less, but they are much more, perhaps as we would expect, but they are much more, I think, focused on the internal skills. So it talks about understanding psychological skills such as goal setting, self-talk, imagery, pre-performance routine, self-regulation, strategies for stress and emotion management. And there are various things, motivation, confidence, understanding social processes and interpersonal skills. But it was quite striking to me how the focus in sports psychology that is much more explicit around some of the internal strategies, skills, development of those kind of skills. And in educational psychology, there's not inclusion of those things under educational psychology as well, even though a lot of what an educational psychologist would be doing sometimes
Yeah.
is trying to support the systems to be able to support the child or young person with those things I've just described from sports psychology.
Yeah.
So I thought that was quite
That's so
interesting.
interesting.
Yeah, and I know you're interested in sports psychology. Kind of what I was thinking was it seems like both could benefit from the other.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
See, I'm such a believer that educational and sports psychology should go hand in hand almost.
Okay, yeah.
Because not just in the realms of supporting PE, but I think in terms of the holistic child, and as you
Yeah.
mentioned, all the domains that sports psychology is focusing on, do we not want that in education too? Do we not want to use theories of motivation to encourage engagement in school? Do we not want to look at goal setting and
Yeah.
targets? And that makes me think of Martin Seligman's PERMA and looking at that engagement side of things. Do we not want to focus on all those mental states that sports psychology seem to want to work on? Do we not want that education?
Yeah. And I think EPs, we actually are doing bits of work like that, aren't we? But it was interesting that it's not explicitly named. And I know there's been this understandable tension, I think, in the profession over the decades around we don't want to be within child focused. And we certainly don't want to be solely within child focused. We need to understand the systems. We need to be promoting healthy, supportive environments, that kind of thing, because that's probably what's going to make the biggest difference. And we also want to help and think about where are the opportunities for the internal personal talk, private speech, if you like to use some of the Vygotsky sort of stuff, to support some of those skills as well, knowing that at certain times we can't use them necessarily. If the environment around us is incredibly stressful, incredibly overwhelming, it's unfair to expect someone to be able to draw upon those skills in that moment. However, they are going to be useful in an ongoing way anyway. And over time, we can train ourselves to be able to think in those ways too.
Absolutely. Wow.
I know.
That is so interesting. That is a link. I think there's room there.
Yes. And I think that's the link for me where I've seen, so kind of jumping back to the benefits for my practice,
Yep.
I have found those skills of self-talk when you're in a stressful meeting and you're thinking,
Yeah.
what's the goal here? You're trying to regulate your breathing, trying to manage stress. Those skills that I have learned in the gym have been really useful for me in practice as well.
Oh, absolutely. I think just having that work resilience as well and staying motivated, clear on what the goals are, even for today. What are my goals? What am I setting out to achieve? What is this direct work? What's the purpose? What's my purpose? You know, I love the self-talk example. That's a
Yeah.
daily battle.
Yes. Isn't it just? Isn't it just? It is. And I'm interested in your own self-talk, your self-talk. If you are faced with a challenge in the gym or at work, what kind of things run through your mind is what I'm wondering about. I'll give an example first, I guess, but it's the kind of natural things I think where I would be thinking, you can't do that. So I'm imagining myself in the middle of a workout. And let's say we're 10 minutes in and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is really, really challenging. It's another opportunity to notice those voices in our heads or my mind that's like, you can't do this. You're done in now. You're going to have to stop. But catching
Yeah.
them and being curious about the alternative, just keep going. What if you can do another few reps? Specifically, what is sore? My legs are sore, but my arms are okay. I'm still able to get up, kind of like catching the thoughts and trying to work through them and practicing that internal muscle of doing that or doing something like that, which transfers into a stressful work situation where you can feel the emotion and the tension, and it is incredibly hard situations, but you're able to catch the thought and think, what is your role here? Who's feeling heard? Who's not feeling heard? What are the psychological needs? I mean, that's how I found it quite useful, just as an example.
That is so interesting because in the gym I try and break down my types of self-talk. So I more of an instructional type of self-talk. I would be like, right, on the count of three, you need to push your left foot down. and then breathe through your nose and out through your mouth. And then as I'll be
Mm.
doing that, and then I'd swap to motivational type of self-talk. Yeah, come on, girl. Now you can do it. Doing really well. And it's jumping
Yeah.
between the two. So in a
Oh,
work-based scenario, I try and do the same in terms of that split. So if there's a really difficult situation, it's what skill do I need to tell myself to do?
okay.
So for example, right, you're going to lower your tone. You're going to
Mhm.
ask this type of question. You're going to write this type of style, and then it will change to, you can do this. You did this
Mm.
before. Come on, you're a good EP.
Yeah,
Balance the two.
that's brilliant.
I've found that I needed to talk a lot to myself, and I've learned that more through endurance training, where you're obviously going to be met with a different type of
Yeah,
challenge, but definitely breaking that down into instruction versus motivation has really, really supports me.
that's fascinating. I'm so glad I asked you that question. Did that come from anywhere, the breakdown? Was that?
Yes. So one of my close friends is a sports psychologist, and I remember talking to her
Oh.
about my mental battles with endurance training and how I'm really struggling and I want to just get off the rowing machine. I absolutely hate it. And she
I hate the rowing machine too.
would always say, "What are you telling yourself?" And I would say,
Yeah.
"Oh, come on, girl," or "I want to get off." It was one of the two.
Yeah.
And she was like, "Well, you need to start giving yourself instructions on the curb running. You need to be saying, push the machine away or pull at this resistance,
Yeah.
something that tells you what to do. And when you get to a
Yeah.
place where you've got a little bit of flow, then you can swap it to, yes, more, keep going, the motivation. And then that together keeps you going."
That is very cool. I really, really like that. It's reminding me of a guy called Ben Bergeron, I think that's his name. He'd written a book, but I remember hearing him talk about, and it's an awful visual, but like an image of being like trapped under ice and someone kind of like bashing the ice and trying really, really hard and relying just on the strength of thing that they've always done to get through the ice. But actually being able to stop and think and like look around and think, oh, there's the space. That's where the space is. Try something else. So I don't know if that makes sense for you too, but it kind
Yeah,
of made me think, when you feel like you're just up against it, up against it, up against it, up against it, there's no way out of this. I'm trying my hardest.
yeah,
If you kind of just take a millisecond to think, to stop and think, okay, wait a wee minute, what's happening? What's around me? What other thoughts might help me here? What other thoughts might also be true? You can keep going and you are also in pain. Both are true. But and just a millisecond to think about what else might be possible.
yeah.
So interesting, isn't it? Any examples you've seen or places, gyms, people where there's been really good adapted environments for people who maybe it's not so possible to come into a gym and use the equipment that's there as standard. I'm thinking about the kind of physical access at
Yeah.
the moment, I suppose. And I know in CrossFit there are like 8 or 9 adaptive divisions. And I would argue that in any CrossFit gym you could go in and there should be someone, a skilled coach to help people to be able to experience movement.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wasn't sure if you'd seen any examples.
I have recently, actually. One of our independent coaches has a brother who is 17 who has cerebral palsy. And he was able to come in, do a session where
Mhm.
everything was completely adapted to him. It was changing the height of the boxes, changing the style of the rower, changing the level of the resistance on the skier, giving lighter dumbbells. And all of these tiny changes allowed this young person to experience the same achievement that we would experience if we were doing the same thing. And I just thought maybe that's something. Can we look at our facilities and just think about the smallest adaptations? The facilities are already there.
Yeah, that's it. We talk about inclusive schools. We need to talk about inclusive gyms and inclusive spaces for everyone to access to.
Absolutely. And that's a gap in the research as well, because my thesis was on mainstream schools. And I didn't find a lot on pupils with SEN and their accessibility or what they thought about sport. And
Right.
I didn't go into that area either. So I think there's a gap there for future studies.
Yeah, and just to name this great book, which is written by a colleague, Dr. Kirsty Rees, The Mental Health and Wellbeing of Children and Young People with Learning Difficulties. And she's got a
Oh,
whole section in there about sensory needs and how for children with learning difficulties, there can be such a range. It's back to assessment, good assessment, where we can understand what are the needs of different children and young people. For some people, it's especially important that
yeah,
they get access to sensory experiences and
absolutely.
movement and activity. And so we need to make sure that we're providing the right opportunities for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. This is fantastic. Let me see what else was I going to ask you. I mean, I suppose I'm thinking about EPs
Mm.
and or people, people who work in education, anyone really who's busy, they've got multiple demands on their time and they are listening to us and they're thinking, well, yeah, that's great for you guys. You've obviously worked something out that you've got the time available to you. And I was wondering what you might say to someone who's keen to get started with something, but they don't quite know how, or they don't quite know what it's going to look like. Any kind of like principles that you have, or how you think about opportunities in your day or in your week for the things that are really important to you, one of which would be your training. Any lessons that you've learned around any of that?
I think my advice would be look at your week and
Mm.
find the gap. So for me, my gap is the early morning. And so all of my training is 6 a.m., maximum 7:30. And I know that that is the consistent gap that I'm going to get. 9 o'clock till 5, I'm consumed with work just like everybody else and I'm tired. So finding the gap and then using those gaps and developing a small structure. So if you know you've only got 1 hour on a Monday, a Wednesday, and a Friday to do something,
Yeah.
keep that. That's your structure and stay with it until it becomes ingrained.
Yeah.
And I think from that, start small, but find something that's fun. So for us here today, it has been the weight. But for you, it might be salsa or walking. Find something that's fun and figure out whether that fun is enough by yourself or whether you need to do that with a community. Because then
Oh, that's good.
that will
Yeah.
determine whether you want to go to a gym or you want to go to the street or something.
That's great.
Because
Mhm.
the dark mornings come and it's the fun that is driving me. The people that I'm going to see that's driving me. After work, my other hobby is salsa, and so it's the fun
Ooh,
and the joy that I know I'm going to get when I do that. So
yeah.
I guard that time for me. And I think sticking to those three principles, so finding the gap, developing your structure, starting small, and making sure you are having fun is just paramount. Keeping it simple.
Keeping it simple. Yeah, it's fab. I think same for me. And I think my relationship with training has changed over the years. When I started CrossFit, I would go straight from work. I'd be in the gym for a couple of hours and it's just not possible anymore. But what I have learned is that it's now a non-negotiable that I do some movement or some sort of workout
Yep.
5-ish days of the week because I know it has an impact on me overall. And that does not anymore look like for me an hour in the gym for those 5 to 7 days. For me now, that's me looking at the week and thinking, or looking at a day. Usually it's sort of looking at the start of the day. These are the things I've got to do.
Mhm.
Can you do even a 10-minute workout, whether it's at home? Got a couple of dumbbells, a kettlebell, got a road I can run up and down. That's my least favorite thing to do. If I can carve out 10 minutes of my day, where might that be and what can I do in that 10 minutes? You do 10 minutes of air squats. That's
Yeah.
you're gonna feel that. And
Yeah. Exactly.
nowadays I'm maybe like once in the gym during the week and
Yeah.
both days at the weekend. But if it's over lunchtime and I set myself a challenge, can I get in and out in 45 minutes? You
Yeah.
know, and so I write a workout beforehand, 25-minute workout, 20-minute workout, in quick warm up, do the workout and out. The shift for me has been, I want you to keep doing this because of the value you found in it. So it's trying to problem solve. How can we make this work, knowing that lifestyle changes have happened and they will continue to happen? And that's the plan for now. Maybe in another year, a couple of years, I'm going to have to reevaluate that again. And maybe next week, reevaluate it again and think, okay, how am I now going to make this work? But it's that principle of kind of knowing yourself and what keeps you feeling okay about things, and make sure you try and get some time in for that. I don't think it's
It's
indulgent. I think it's sort of,
No, it's not. It's an investment, isn't it? If not for your physical, more your mental. These jobs these days, they weigh so much and they take up so much of our lives that you can't help but feel pent up sometimes. And we're pushing self-care and well-being. And that I would love, I always say in my service, people to start taking that more seriously as it pertains to you. Well, we're no good for the job. That's always been my attitude as a trainee right through, is that this time is guarded because I cannot do this job without it because I'm not in one piece.
it's all those principles, isn't it? Like, what do you need in your life to help you feel like it's a preventative step? And even if sometimes it is just about taking one step at a time, isn't it? And just kind of getting through. But if we are in a place of being able to think preventatively,
Yeah,
it's usually time well spent, isn't it? Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I was keen to ask about your potential Unlocked award. That's great. Do you know anything about how that came about, or where the nomination came from, or anything like that?
Yeah, so Potential Unlocked Awards once a year, and it is one of our family friends in from our local church, but this event just seems to have just grown. And I was nominated for this, and I thought, oh, then what? But it's an award that wants to celebrate the achievements of those from diverse backgrounds and for those people who want to work to impact and motivate children and young people coming up. And the founder himself grew up and he got given a diagnosis of dyslexia, and he really struggled in education and was told all of these negative things and that he wasn't going to achieve because he has dyslexia, but he's now overcome this, and it's his passion to inspire us to overcome our challenges. And so I was nominated for this award, obviously coming from a diverse ethnic background, but also I think showing, from my view, a bit of resilience with all of the educational struggles that I have had. And in the Black community, it's still kind of, it's a big deal when somebody comes out of an education system with a doctor to their name, because that is not the norm for us. And it's so sad to say, but that's not normal, in terms of like stereotypes. So to have someone who's young, female, and from a Black background, and even just reflecting on this, I hope that I can show someone who looks like me that they can do these things, that there is nothing that is too hard. I came through so much difficulty, and I ended up in a really good university that I didn't get into at undergraduate, but I got in for a doctorate degree, and I've come out the other end in one piece.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
hope to just inspire people to do the same, and it's been really beautiful to receive messages of, wow, one day I want to do this, or could you give me some advice, or could you read my statement? And it's just yes. And,
That's amazing.
I hope to use this position that I now have as a way of motivating others to chase education or chase whatever they need, or just go after it. 'Cause if I listened, or if I focused on that I can't do maths, then I wouldn't be doing what I do now.
Yeah, that's amazing. And like I said at the start, I think the Potential Unlocked as a name for the award, it seems so fitting and so apt. And now you are, as you say, you're in a position of being a role model for other people, just in the way that others have been for you. It's very cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so congratulations.
Oh, thank you so much.
Just before we go, actually, something that I'm keen to ask most guests, I think we've touched on it, that I think probably the whole theme of our conversation is relevant to this question, but I think a lot of people listening to this will be trainee educational psychologists, or those maybe who are also reasonably newly qualified. Do you have any lessons you've learned, or any tips, or any sort of things people have said to you that have been really helpful, or any routines, or that kind of thing? So obviously your training is a big one that's been helpful to you. Anything else that comes to mind that you would maybe think, oh, I could pass that on, that might help someone else?
The best things that helped me on the course were keeping things simple, especially when it comes to essays, thesis, anything that needs to be written, keeping it simple. I think sometimes we want to do like big elaborate projects and pieces of work, and the focus is learning, yes, also getting through. And my supervisor would always tell me that. She's like, we just need you to get through. When you qualify, then you can change the world. But until then, getting through. And then I think it's just finding that routine. So when I was a trainee, it was Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, placement, Thursday, Friday, university. And I just never deviated from that at all, no matter what.
Yeah. And so that's in terms of like the work that you would be doing. So placement, not just on placement, but also the placement related work. And then the Thursday, Friday would be your university work days. Is that how you were?
Thursday,
Yeah.
Friday, strictly university work day. There was no crossing over into, finishing a report on a Friday.
Placement,
None of that.
right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I think that will be especially useful for some trainees to hear, because I know that people do struggle, because it gets to that point, doesn't it, where placement work, especially in year 2, starts to feel like, well, this is the real work, but watch that doesn't put too much stress on you getting the actual uni work done, which does need to get done in order for you to qualify.
Yeah.
So thinking about boundaries around that sounds like it'll be very useful for folk to be reminded of, I think. Right. Thank you so much, Melissa. I think that is us at the end. It's been so nice to connect with you and just get to know each other a little bit more. And I hope that it won't be the last time as well.
No, it won't. This has been so refreshing. Talk about everything I love.
I know. And it'd be amazing if we could have a training session together at some point. Although I'll let you do the lifting first. And
take me for a CrossFit session. I'm ready.
That would be so fun. That would be great.
Well, if you see any team event and you need a girl, call me. I'm here for it.
Amazing. We should look out for pairs competitions or something.
Yeah.
What a pleasure it was to speak with Melissa and share stories, thoughts and experiences. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did, and that it might stimulate further thought around what each of us needs to make sure we're looking after ourselves in these busy lives and important jobs. I'll include some details about how you can find more about Melissa's training in the show notes and about the resources mentioned. Take care, and many thanks again.